Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tenser, curator of Say Hi to the Future, helping leaders think differently in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity. Better thinking, better outcomes. With me today is Neal Foard, Chief Marketing Officer at Within Inc., and an award-winning advertising and marketing creative professional. Like this video if you enjoy our show, and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Neal, I don't usually start interviews like this, but I came across you on the internet. I think you had actually liked an episode or a comment about an episode, and your work is delightful. I
Oh,
mean,
thank you. Appreciate that.
truly, when I listen to what you say, when I hear the stories that you bring to us, and we'll talk about a few of them, boy, they just make you pause and really think and not stop thinking after that YouTube video is ending. So, how do you come by this? Where did storytelling come from for you?
Yeah, it's I spent 30 years in advertising and marketing on the creative side. And when in that job, your responsibility is to communicate as quickly, as cogently, as emotionally potent a way as you can, the merits of some product or service. And what I discovered is, there's more. You can apply that science to more than just trying to shill a car or a dessert topping. That in fact you can improve the commons if you apply all the lessons of storytelling learned through the art of propaganda, and just to trying to improve our connections to one another. There's a thing that I think you will probably be sympathetic with, that we are inundated, just absolutely carpet bombed with messages telling us how awful we are. Reality television, if they can't get people to fight organically, they'll sleep deprive them or they'll get them liquored up. And there's nothing quite like having people go without sleep to get them at their worst. Now, why would they do that? Why is that necessary? Well, because it makes good television when people are fighting with one another, when people are showing their worst side. So we get pummeled by these incessant messages about how, it's quite normal when people are this way. No, it's not. You will find, if you examine your life, Ken, I'll bet you, if you kept a record of the number of times during a day when people were courteous to you or did something unnecessarily sweet-natured, you'd be surprised at how quickly you fill the pages of a book. Great example is my daughter was in Starbucks. There was how the lines in Starbucks can sometimes get squirrely. Somebody's in line, then they notice a coffee cup that they might be interested in. They step out of line briefly, then they step back, or they suddenly realize that the line has firmed up and they're embarrassed to jump back in. Well, there she was in Starbucks, and a guy did exactly that. He sort of tucked out of the line briefly to take a look at a coffee cup, turned around, suddenly realized, oh my God, I'm standing way outside of this thing, started to go to the back of the line. My daughter said, oh, no, I know you were here. Go ahead and come back in. And as he came back in, the woman in front of him, who noticed what my daughter done, said, I love people with good manners. And just that small remark made my daughter's day. She felt like, there's hope for humanity. And it turns out that most people like good-natured, good-mannered people. And all around us, you will see examples. And particularly if you do this, because of the stories that I've been telling on social media, there's only so many of them that have happened to me. So now I'm starting to look for more stories. And in the process of looking for nice things that people are doing for each other, little kindnesses, and people picking up trash they didn't have to and otherwise. What happens is when you start looking for it, oh yeah, you find it. It's there. It's there in abundance. And so essentially my story, per your question, is just that I spent 30 years in the business of trying to sell people things. And now I've decided to make it my mission to sell them on the fact that that human beings are actually, for the most part, pretty cool.
Well, one, it's a great sentiment. Two, I think it's really needed now. I mean, the pressure we're under is incredible. And I think that with that pressure, it sort of begets. I love the notion of kindness because otherwise it begets this hatred, or the value of the currency of hate escalates. And I think that's what we see happening right now in the world in
Yeah.
so many places, just because of the absolute pressures we're under as human beings. And I think you're right. I think it are those little things that can just maybe take away just a little pinprick at a time, rather than taking
Yeah.
on the whole wall.
Yeah. There's two phenomenon that I just shrugged my shoulders. The first is the profit in selling division. It's very profitable to sell conflict. So it's not a very short journey between discovering that you can make a lot of money with conflict and fomenting it. That's a pretty short hop. The second
Right.
thing is, you may have noticed this yourself. You'll watch, say, an investment show, and the host of the show is loudly proclaiming the future. This is going to happen, that's going to happen, and being unbelievably wrong multiple times. And they don't yank him off the air. And you're thinking, how does this guy survive? He's freaking very commonly wrong, dead wrong. Well, because there is a profit in selling something that is not going to happen, because you can bet on its opposite. And these things are very disappointing. They're not common, though. It's just that they have big megaphones.
Right.
So they sell it to us like it's common, but it's not. And you know what happens as a result, Ken, is that they convince you that being a nice guy is to be a sucker. But that's not true either. What I'm finding more and more is how gratifying it is to try to reassure people that they're not alone. And life gets so much better when people like you. So I don't understand why there is this impulse to be such a polarizing figure among media people. I just don't. Well, I should be grateful that I don't get it.
But when you say that, and then you talk about the story of your daughter, and that small kindness, that small gesture that she made that changed somebody's day. I mean, I do see that a lot in the next generation. I see, with my own kids who are mid to late 20s, how they care about other people, how they have become foundation directed in their careers,
Yeah.
in some cases. Um,
That's not new, by the way, Ken. People don't change. That's not new. I'll give you an example of why I say that with such firmness. Because I was watching a video of Viktor Frankl, the guy that had written the book called Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor
Right.
Frankl had survived the Auschwitz,
Yeah.
and this profound experience led him to complete this book that he'd been working on, Man's Search for Meaning. And when he was doing a lecture at Harvard University in 1961, he was talking about how everybody that Europeans often think that Americans are only interested in money. And they interviewed people in European students at Harvard about what they thought American students were chiefly motivated by, their conclusion being money, only to discover that the actual breakdown of statistics was a complete contradiction of that. That in fact, the vast majority of Harvard students in 1961 were in fact very outwardly directed, very service directed. And so that's why I say, you know what, if you really probably do the stats, you're going to find year after year, media notwithstanding, that people are actually pretty much interested in being good to each other.
So agreed to that. I think what might have changed, though, is that as much as divisiveness might have a microphone or a megaphone, so too do the youth. Now have a megaphone for good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, I guess, what I was alluding to, is that they are out there, they're doing things, they are sharing things, and they're building communities for good, which in the 60s and 70s, we did not have the opportunity to do.
There was certainly in the 60s and 70s. I grew up in the Bay Area in California, and it was an absolute hotbed, a petri dish of new ideas, new thinking. And, the Haight-Ashbury was very big in San Francisco, and in Berkeley, we had People's Park, and there were, Esalen, et cetera, just all of these
Right.
new age things that were emerging, and some of them quite bad, but a lot of them quite good. A lot of them very encouraging. But I'll give you an example of what I mean. So I used to deliver papers for the Oakland Tribune in the 70s. And I was a little kid. And one day, every sort of third or fourth week of the month, they would have you go out in a van for the Oakland Tribune, and you would try to sell subscriptions. And one day I was down in, I guess, Fruitvale or whatever district of Oakland. And there was a full-on Black Panther meeting going on in the very building that I, knocked on the door. And instead of being greeted with any kind of hostility or suspicion or anything remotely, resembling that, this young guy with the full-on beret and the black leather jacket invites me in, and he announces to the room, "My man here wants to see if anybody wants to subscribe to the Tribune." And there are these quizzical looks back at him, like, "You do understand we're in the middle of a meeting here, man." And so he goes, "You got a better pitch than mine?" And I said, "Well, you can do this." And they very patiently listened to this 11-year-old trying to explain the merits of the Oakland Tribune, my little rehearsed speech. And then nobody was.
But they listened.
Nobody was a taker. Well, they were just being kind, to try to let me get it out of my system. So, this guy then takes me back to the front door, sort of shrugs, and he goes, "Sorry, man, I tried." And I thought, okay. So then I go home and I announce to my parents at dinner, "Hey, I crashed a Black Panther meeting today, blah, blah, blah." And I tell the whole story. My mother is incensed that they would have dropped me off down there, to encounter such a group. My father couldn't have been more tickled. He said to my mom, he goes, "Would you just relax? That kid was safer there than anywhere else on earth. You don't understand. This is about completely different issues than some 11-year-old kid." Okay. Yeah. Take a chill. So, my personal experience was that oftentimes political movements get portrayed a certain way, but when you encounter them in real life, it doesn't match the portrayal. People get. I'm not going to defend the Black Panthers, nor am I going to endorse them, or nor am I going to condemn them. I'm just saying that was my personal experience, and it's you may have had this experience, Ken, of being close enough to a news story where you knew what actually happened. And then when you read the news account, you're like, "What? That isn't what." I was very close to the Toyota recall of the Camry. And I saw very, up close the data and the so forth that they had it. And this idea of unintended acceleration was a bogus claim. Now, we all knew it, but Toyota had to behave a certain way during the conduct of that recall in order not to alienate people, because they understood, you can't fight these misperceptions. You just have to respond with sincerity, authenticity, and genuineness, and just accept that people are prone to their weaknesses and their faulty beliefs, and they will only be brought into the light if you just by your behavior, not by you going to war over them over some inaccurate portrayal.
As you tell that, I mean, one of the phrases you have up on that you mentioned is, "It's not what you say that matters; it's what people hear."
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Hearing though today, I mean, it's like we have earmuffs on. So, is it what we hear? Is it what I mean, selective attention or inattention, however you look at it? We filter out so much today. How do we actually break through with those positive messages, or with true messages, if you will?
Yeah. And again, this is not new among human beings, but people don't. There's a wonderful, I think it's a Maya Angelou quote or poem, and she says that people won't remember what you say nor what you did. They will remember how you made them feel. And I believe that the way to break through is by trying to reflect a kind of generosity of spirit, a sincerity and authenticity that has room to accommodate other opinions without demonizing someone. I found, in my youth, boy, I had a hair trigger temper. I was likely to be one of these D-bags on the freeway who gets road rage, not understanding that the world is not out to get you. The world doesn't even think of you. So there's no reason to greet the world with hostility when you just have to accept that not everybody's having a great day. Even as I have come to believe that 95% of people are actually pretty decent. Everybody's got a bad day. I'll give you an example, Ken. You probably had this experience. Have you ever said something for which you had to apologize later? Yeah, a lot. In my case,
Yeah.
a lot. Have you ever made a mean remark about somebody behind their back? Oh, yeah, I've done that. And so you can't very well blame the rest of society for ill remarks when you yourself have been guilty of it. You have to grant a certain amount of grace. And what I'm discovering is I'm sort of beginning to live by kind of really fundamental rules, and they're serving me well. And I wish I'd sort of learned them earlier. One is always try to leave something better than you found it. So whether you're a Boy Scout in a campsite and you police the site before you go to make sure you haven't left behind any trash, even if somebody else has left a mess in the fire pit, you clean it up. The Japanese fans at soccer games, that's what they remember during World Cup in Qatar, and they were all out. The Japanese fans after the games would clean up the stands. That gesture said more about the Japanese than anything they say. Right. And then another thing is I besides just leaving things better than I found them, is I try to give people a good reason to like me. And even if they don't, I like to try to give them a reason. I'll give you a small example. Okay, so, and everybody can do this. I like to buy these little bags of little plastic toys, little things like dinosaurs and army men and what do you call them? Troll dolls. And I'll always leave them. If I ever order coffee in a Starbucks or with a barista, I'll leave them I'll say, hey, I got this for you. So you give this little pterodactyl to the barista and they look at you like, what? It's just, it's so silly and stupid that it brings a smile. And when I get onto airplanes, I will always have a pocket full of little plastic airplanes. And so I'll get on. And when I get to the flight attendant that greets you at the door, I'll say, hey, you can give this to any kids that get on board. And I always give them more than one, because inevitably, if you give them one, then they'll run into two kids and then they'll cause a civil war. So I've learned that lesson. So you give them, a handful of these things. The flight attendant they're like, oh, fantastic. Oh my God, that's fantastic. Now, when kids get on board, they give them these things. Okay, so here's what happens. They know that the parents are going to enjoy that. And the flight attendants also know they're going to make the kids happy. So the flight attendant gets the joy of being the one who makes the fun happen. Now, I get the benefit of knowing that the flight attendant's going to benefit. And the parents look kindly upon the flight attendant. Anything you can do to make a flight attendant's day better, you have just earned, you've put a big deposit in the Karma 401k. I don't know if you've got 401ks up in Canada, but
pretty close. RSPs, okay. We're all good.
Okay. But in any case, you do that little gesture to spread just a tiny bit of joy, and it sort of haunts you for the rest of the day.
Tell us about your national road trip.
As a result of the videos that I'd been doing, which is essentially trying to encourage people that, there's a lot of goodness out there and you can find it if you look for it. I got just the nicest notes from people, little emails where they would say, hey, if you're ever in Erie, Illinois, or you're ever in, Cedar City, come on, swing by and I'll buy you a cup of coffee or a beer just to talk. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, what a charming idea. And I started taking people up on it. And I've had quite a few of these gatherings. And there's two phenomenon that are unbelievably, you wouldn't think it would go this way, but it does, which is when people really feel like they know you when you tell stories. And they kind of do, because when you tell a story, a lot of yourself is getting reflected in not just what you're talking about, but how you're telling it. And so I'll get together with these people. I had a lunch with a cat out in Minneapolis. We got together and met, and it's like, oh, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. And we spent 2.5 hours talking about fatherhood, like we were old pals, like we were just like, honest to God, Ken, it felt like we'd known each other forever. And this was the first time we'd ever met face to face. We hadn't exchanged more than maybe 2 emails. And they were all there was like, it was like, oh, I'll meet you at such and such restaurant. And it was just so encouraging and so reassuring that, you know, you're sort of onto something here, that people kind of really are pretty good. Well, I decided, you know what, the heck with it. I'm gonna try to string together a bunch of them. Like, and since not everybody lives in, you know, in the cities that I do business in, I thought, well, you know, I'm gonna get on the road. I'm literally gonna jump in the car. I'm gonna head east, and I'm gonna just start hitting these stops, whether it's El Paso or Memphis or Nashville. And so I just sent out an email. I'm going to do a kind of a 9-city little jaunt, I think starting in either Nashville or Chattanooga, making my way down to Atlanta and then on to Savannah. And we're going to see how it goes. But it really is nothing more than just getting together to see if I can score a free coffee.
Hey, sounds good. I love the idea, and it's nice to meet those who are pressing those buttons on social media.
Yeah,
Put some humanity to them. So
people are sort of like weirded out that I'm responding. They're like, "What? It's for real? You going to come out here?" Yep. And I'm going to be in Erie, Illinois on August 9th and 10th because this very earnest disc jockey out there just wouldn't let up. So it's gonna be
very cool. As our time comes to a close today on Say Hi to the Future, one last question, and I actually purposefully did not research it. I'm leaving this on you, Sonia. Can you tell us about Rancho Madhammer?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So in order to sort of fund this trip across the country, I started a Patreon page, and I needed a sort of premium to offer people as like, hey, you know, if you sign up, you can get this every month. So I'm writing this book. It's based on my personal experiences, and many of the stories that I tell in it are true, but it's also plays pretty fast and loose at the same time. I will make up stuff. So essentially what it is it's based on a real thing that the Medici family used to do in Florence, Italy, which is the Medicis wanted their children to be educated by more than just the clergy of the Catholic Church. So what they would do is they would invite artisans, artists, architects, astronomers, philosophers, playwrights. They would invite them to live in the home, and just so that the children would listen to what they talked about at dinner time. So the rule was, you can do whatever you want to do, and we'll be happy to sponsor your art or your architecture or whatever. We'll be your patrons, but you must allow for a certain part of the day to be engaged with the children so that they will learn that there's a big world out there filled with new ideas. Right. Well, there was something of a house here in where I live, Rancho Palos Verdes, where they were doing something quite similar. They had this big sprawling estate with many houses, sort of, you might call them little casitas attached to the property. And so this story, Rancho Madhammer, is loosely based on bringing artists and thinkers and architects and, you know, all kinds of rabble into the home so that the children would listen to the conversations. And the book is the conversations that take place at the dinner table.
Well, that sounds wonderful. And I think I'm sure that on your road trip, you're going to be picking up some wonderful new stories to incorporate.
Yes, that's the hope, is that, I'll pick up some cool stories.
Neal Foard, thank you again.
That's my pleasure, Ken.
Take care.
Cheers.